Hello, hello, and welcome to the Sassy CEO podcast. I am Paula Bailey, and I am so super excited to have you here. This is the very first episode of the Sassy CEO podcast. It has been a long time in the making. I'm going to tell you exactly how long when you get into listening to this episode. I've just finished recording, and I go through the real truth of what it took to get me here. A little bit of vulnerability from me, a little bit of regret from me, but I want to go through that. I tell you all about that in the episode. But we mainly talk about the topic of doing things that make you feel uncomfortable. So those next steps. And this is really an important topic for you if you're running a business and you know that there's certain things that you need to be doing. They're probably things that make you uncomfortable, things that you've never done before, but you know deep down in your heart that if you did those things, it would make a huge difference to your business. So if you've been feeling stuck, I've got 3 breakthroughs that I want to share with you in this episode. Breakthroughs around how your strategic plan can actually help you move past feeling stuck each and every day. I want to go through the magic questions that you should be asking yourself. These are magic questions that make feeling brave super, super easy. And then the secret about your failure, about my failure, there's a secret to failure. And once you finally get this and you can rewire your brain over this, there's no stopping you. So in the episode, I also talk about the strategic plan. And so I put together a template for you so that you can actually put your own business into the template to see what I'm talking about. And if you head over to www.sassyceo.com.au/free gift, you'll be able to download your very own copy of that template to use on your own business. Okay, I've said enough. Let's get started. Hello, hello. And here we are. Wow, it feels so weird to be sitting in this moment. I have been wanting to start a podcast for, I think the first time I chatted to my husband about the concept of doing a podcast was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And I put it out there. I remember buying lots of courses to do it. I don't know if you can vibe with me on that one, where you decide you're going to do something in your business and then you go and you decide that you've got to do all the research on it. And so I did lots of research on doing podcasts. I listened to lots of other people's podcasts. I bought everything that you could think of to learn about podcasts. And nothing ever eventuated. I just never felt ready. I always felt like it wasn't the right time. I told myself I didn't have the right equipment. I thought that I needed to have the perfect process. Part of what I do is, constructing great processes and wanting to make things really efficient. And when you are that minded, when you're inclined to want to create processes, it can also slow you down. Because I thought, I wonder if I can download the perfect process for creating a podcast so that we can make this effortless and easy. But unfortunately, all these reasons for doing, getting started with the podcast also kept me stuck and not actually doing the podcast. And here we are 4 or 5 years later. And today I'm sitting here on the 17th of September, 2019, a very historic day for me, feeling ready to finally unleash the Sassy CEO podcast. I finally feel ready. And I often ask myself, and as I've been preparing to do this show, I've been asking this question a lot, which is, I wonder what would have happened or where I'd be now, where my business would be, how many more people I would have helped if I'd just gotten over all those things and those thoughts and actually started 4 or 5 years ago. Where would I be? What would I be doing? And it got me thinking that is the perfect place to start for this very first episode of the Sassy CEO Society, this whole concept of, deciding that you're going to do something new, something maybe a little bit uncomfortable, something you've never done before in your business. You've planned it out. You know that it's going to be great for your business. It's going to mean that you can maybe reach more people, or you can streamline something with your team, whatever it is. You know that it's the logical next thing to do, or we've got logic on one side, but intuitively it also feels like the right thing to do. That next step, how do we get past the perfectionism, the all the reasons to procrastinate? How do we get past that so we can actually get started and move forward with projects, even though deep down inside we kind of feel like we want to vomit a little bit? Because I won't lie, right now I'm feeling quite nervous, which is really strange. I do Instagram stories, I do Facebook Lives, but the thing is, the first time I ever did any of those, I was feeling quite nervous too, and here I am. It's really no different, but it feels very different to me, and right now my brain wants to tell me it's very different. So I'm going to move through this fear with you. I'm going to share that, and that's something I really want to do a lot of in this show, is be really transparent and very open about the process that I'm going through, so that perhaps if by sharing that with you, it might help you to move through something so that you can unleash more magic from your business and for yourself. So let's go through the breakthroughs I want you to have, that I've had as well, around getting past the procrastination, past the perfectionism, so that you can take the next step to being successful in business, whatever that means for you. So the first thing that I really want to have a chat about is, the whole reason around why you might actually want to do whatever the next step for you. And this might not be a podcast. It could be anything. It could be just something new in your marketing. It could be a new direction with a product or, one of your services. It might be something to do with expanding your team. Ultimately, it's that something that is next level for you, and it really does bring up that level of fear, feeling a little bit sick, don't quite know how it's all going to work out. And the very first thing that I always bring everything back to when I'm talking to my Sassy CEOs is the big why. It seems obvious, but a lot of people forget about this one, and I think they go into picking the thing that they're going to do and they pluck it out. And often we can make decisions in, these snap decisions without really thinking about, the big picture. And so in the strategic planning that we do with Sassy CEOs, we always start with the bigger picture, because we really need to go from a macro level to truly understand the innate reasons of why we're doing something. So it actually all starts with your purpose. And this is kind of like the template for how you would create a Sassy CEO strategic plan. Then when you make the decisions for your business based on this template and this big macro picture, the map that you've got of where you're going, when you find that the blocks, the bullshit stories, the fear starts to come up, you can actually use the macro picture to help you get through the more minor things that you need to do so that you can keep moving forward. So we always start with the big picture, and that's actually a purpose question. What is the purpose? And you can obviously ask purpose questions from a personal point of view. You've obviously, got a purpose if you're someone who's interested in making an impact, interested in contributing in the world. You obviously at some point think about your own personal purpose. But in terms of businesses, when we're talking to Sassy CEOs or women who are running their businesses, we are looking at them to look at their business as a separate entity to themselves, which sometimes can be a little bit tricky if you've built the business and you are the business historically. But when you extrapolate yourself out and you really put yourself in this position of a leader within this business organization, the business has a purpose. And the way that I define that in my IP and the work that I do with Sassy CEOs is, the purpose is, what would your business be remembered for? If you were gone, you've moved off this earthly plane and you're no longer here 100 years from now, what would you and the organization be remembered for? And then a step down from that purpose is the next level, which would be your mission. And we split up missions into sort of 3 to 5 year projects that help you lead up into that purpose. So I always sort of describe the purpose as this big moon, and then the mission being kind of like the rocket ship that takes you towards the moon. It takes you just that little bit closer every 3 to 5 years. It's who are you serving? What are you doing in the next 3 to 5 years? 3 to 5 years? What are you creating? What impact would you have? And then how does that contribute to you actually hitting your purpose at some point? Then a layer down from that, in the Sassy CEO strategic template system is thinking about your actual priorities, say on an annual and quarterly level, which then obviously takes you down into a project task level on a weekly, daily, hourly level. So it really is a whole template to help you map out big picture what you're doing, but also day to day what you should be doing, so that you don't have those days where you feel lost and not sure what you're doing. But throughout this process, you're obviously going to get the opportunity to really look at different opportunities, different strategies, different things that you can be doing in your business, which is when you would obviously make a decision to do something different, enter that fear, that worry. But the thing is, when you are truly connected to something bigger than, say, take myself for example, I feel scared today. I've just finished speaking to a client, and she's the first to know that this podcast is going to be coming out. And we were chatting about feeling anxious or feeling fear. And there is no doubt about it that as I sat down to start prepping myself to do this episode, that I felt that fear. But when I go up into a more macro level and I look at my own plan for what I have as I lead my business here at Sassy CEO into the future, and the people that we want to impact, the women that we want to help, their families, the lives that we want to change, all of a sudden it stops being about me and my bullshit stories just disappear. And that's the power of having a big why. It's the power of having things mapped out, so that when you have days where you're feeling the fear, when you have days where you find yourself procrastinating, putting things off, finding excuses, you've got something bigger to connect into. It's almost like the guiding light. We often look for that, show me the sign, show me the way. That is a faith-based conversation. However, having that already mapped out is such an important aspect of being able to bring yourself into alignment to move forward with the things, even when they scare the absolute shit out of you. So your big why is one of the breakthroughs that I want you to think about. If you haven't mapped that out, if you haven't really thought about your own business and its purpose and its mission and the bigger why of why you're doing this, not only within yourself as a person, but the actual organization that you're growing and working on every single day, take some time to do that, because having that why, the clarity of where you're going, the big picture, the big macro roadmap, is something that is so valuable to have when you're finding yourself stuck in fear-based activities, unable to move forward. So that's the first step. After that, it's all around really asking yourself better questions. So usually I find when I work with clients and there's fear or procrastination or anxiety over something, there is more to this issue than meets the eye. So if I take again myself for an example, I wanted to start this podcast, so like I said, 4 or 5 years ago. However, I made a lot of excuses. But if we really go deeper into some of those excuses, I don't have the right equipment, I don't feel ready, maybe I don't know enough yet, I need to have all the right processes in place, meaning I have to have all my ducks in a row. We go deeper and ask past Paula why. If we'd really dug deep, we'd see that there was a whole lot of other things going on around maybe not really being sure of how to get started or what I would need, and the whole thing just feeling like it was a little bit overwhelming. And so something that I often say to clients, I think this is such an important thing to remember, is when we're not getting the answers that we want, maybe it just feels confusing or it's chaotic, we have to ask a better question. We have to ask a more insightful question. And some of the best questions we can ask, I want to share with you, especially when we're feeling stuck. Things like, what do I actually want? And that kind of goes back into what I was just talking about in terms of the why, but it's, it could go back to actually what you want. For me, I wanted a really great way to be able to share my ideas, I want to bring other people onto the show, connect with other amazing humans. Because for the last 4 years, I've had some incredible conversations. And every time I'm having this conversation, there's this little voice at the back of my head that says, PB, you should be recording this because this would be so useful for everyone else out there who's wanting to build businesses too. And why we can, just only having this conversation on this mini level when we could be sharing it with more people by actually recording it. So what do I want? I want to share more love. I want to have more impact. I want to help more people. And then you can ask yourself why. So this is it's a deeper exercise. It's not just superficial whys. The why, we talk about the sort of 7 layers of why. You keep asking yourself, why? What do I want? Why? I want to have a bigger impact. Why? And you just keep asking why. Sometimes it can help to just have your journal there and keep asking yourself these things to just go deeper and deeper, because there's so much goodness when we stop and actually ask ourselves some really insightful questions. Often we're addicted to being busy. We're addicted to moving and being on social and shooting from the hip and just hustling and taking action. And the whole thing just stops us from actually slowing down. The answers are within you. It's just the space that you need to create to actually ask the questions. So some other questions you might want to ask yourself are things like, what is it that I need to know? Like, Paula 4 years ago needed to know just a simple way to get started. She was complicating it big time. Whereas she needed to know that she could just pick up a microphone. She probably didn't even need a microphone really. And she could just start talking. And that would be enough. That's what she needed to know. But she was too busy not really asking the right questions, being busy and not really sitting with the right questions to ask herself. What resources do I need? What resources do I have? Because often we can get ourselves into these tiers, we can feel really anxious and we can feel like we don't have anything or we don't know anything. But if we really sat down and you could almost like draw a line down the center of a page and say, resources I have, resources I need, you'd be really surprised. I do this questioning all the time with clients and they're always very surprised when they actually stop and check in. I mean, we're usually, having a conversation with a subconscious mind. You do actually have quite a lot of resources at your disposal. It's just we are so caught up in, I don't know if I can do that, and all the chatter, the mental chatter that goes on, that we forget how much we do have available. And resources doesn't necessarily always mean money or time. It could be people. There's lots of ways that you can actually attract resources to you. So take some time to actually think about what resources do you need and have right now for this thing that you have been putting off doing. Why am I not really taking action on this? Why am I not really taking action on this? Well, the answer could be because I'm fearful. Why am I fearful? So you can see I'm starting to go back into that why loop. There is so much juiciness to be found in asking yourself questions. Now, I'm not proposing that you sit here all day long and just ask yourself questions, because in effect, that is another strategy of procrastination. But if you really find yourself stuck, laying the foundations by doing this work can help you to get unstuck. You kind of have to make a pact with yourself and say, well, I'm going to give myself this space. Maybe it's a day, maybe it's an hour to just ask myself the questions, and then I'm going to go and do it anyway. Final question that you could ask yourself, because this is really, I think, such a fundamental question to ask yourself a lot in business, is what's the worst thing that could happen? Because there's no guarantees in business. I think a lot of us seek to be secure and to feel safe and want everything to be lined up. I know a lot of women use that terminology, having everything, all my ducks in a row, and that control, and that it's all just an illusion to have that. And I think the more comfortable we can get with being uncomfortable and knowing that no matter whatever our perceived worst outcome is, that we would invariably be okay. And I think when you can actually really come to terms with whatever it is in your mind, whatever the worst thing is, the worst thing that could possibly happen here is nobody ever listens to me, and eventually I stopped doing it. I find that really hard to say that now because I know that that's not the truth. I know that the secret for me is to keep showing up, to be consistent, to just keep showing up over and over. I've listened to enough people to know now, and I've seen the evidence within my own business that even when I was doing things and I thought I sucked, the things that I just kept doing, even though my high expectations of myself, that perfectionist, I call it the control queen in us, wanted to tell me that it was all sucking and that it wasn't good enough. When I was committed and I stayed with things, they were the best outcomes. And so I know that that actually couldn't be the worst thing. So when you're really honest with yourself and you really start asking you this question from a place of knowing and from a place of truth, you really start to see that the worst possible thing is not really the worst possible thing, because it's just not possible for it to be that bad that you can't survive it. It's impossible, which really brings me to the last point, and that's all around being okay with that worst outcome, being okay with something sucking. I was listening to a podcast this morning, the MFCEO Project, great podcast. And there was one thing that was said, I can't remember the topic of the podcast, but it was, you've got to be okay with being bad to be a badass, or a badass, because they're from America. And I loved it because it's so true. You have to be okay with being bad to be a badass. You have to be okay with sucking. If you think back to when you were a baby, my son's 2 at the moment, and I'm watching him do things for the first time. He falls flat on his face as he's learning to, get a little bit faster with his walking and his running, and he must fall flat on his face at least 15, 20 times a day. And when he falls and he stacks, he's got little bruises on his chin, and he doesn't sit there and go, oh, I'm sucking at this, I better retract, I better stop. No, because if that happened, none of us would ever be walking around. We wouldn't be moving. We wouldn't be doing the things that we're doing as adults. So at what point in our life do we start to decide that it's not okay to suck at some point? When you're doing something new, you're going to learn as you go along. And so I am connecting in with my future self now, who's maybe 5-10 years ahead of me, looking back going, wow, so glad I started that podcast. I don't know if you've seen, if you've watched Queen of the South. My husband and I have been getting into that, and I love the fact that she keeps having visions of herself in the future, and she's almost connecting in with her, because it's a very powerful process to do. We talk about doing this a lot in the Sassy CEO programs, that, from an energetic point of view, from a mindset point of view, to be really connecting in. It's part of your identity forming, so that you can connect in and really make change as a woman, to be able to create the business that you want, because you cannot create something different being the same person that you are. So I love that they keep doing that in the show, because it keeps reminding me to connect in with the future PB. And the future PB, when I talk to her right now, is looking back on this day, the 17th September 2019, and high-fiving me right now for, even though an hour ago I felt like vomiting, stepping up and still going, you know what? Even if no one watches this, and if you are watching this, or if you are listening to this at this point, I am so super, super grateful for your support, and just sending lots of love to you. But I'm okay with this probably not being the greatest podcast I'll ever do, because it's the first podcast I've ever done. And that's okay. It's okay for us to fail. It's okay for us to not be great at everything straight away. I typically work with women. We're so used to having to have everything perfect, to wanting to be, just top of everything, and wanting to be top of our class, top of, the best of the best. We want the best of the best. We seek the best of the best in life. We expect a lot from ourselves, and sometimes that leaves no room to play. So today I choose to play. Today I choose to just throw caution to the wind and be okay to suck, because there really is no such thing as failure. The only thing that will happen from today is I will get feedback. Maybe I'll get feedback from you. Feel free to send that through. My podcast manager is highly encouraging me to watch my shows back, which not going to lie, I often don't watch my content back. It makes me quite uncomfortable, but it's something that I want to get better at, because I know that the more I can just watch myself and learn from what I'm doing, the better I can make this. And the better I can make this, the more people I can serve and the more people I can help. And you can see how that intrinsically drives me, because it connects back into my bigger why, going back to that first point that I was talking about. So be okay to be bad. Know that being bad means that eventually you're on the road to badass. There's no such thing as failure. So there you have it. Those are 3 things that I think are really big breakthroughs that I want you to start considering. If there's something that you have been considering doing in your business, a change that you know is going to be for the better, it's going to be something that will make a difference. Even though you're not quite sure how it's all going to work out, this is a sign. If you're listening to this, this is a sign. I hope you can follow my lead and just paint the picture, even though you're not quite sure what the picture is going to end up looking like. Have faith, connect in with your future self. Think about what your future self would say to you right now in terms of advice, because I know I feel like I'm at a point where I never want to ask myself again, what would I be doing, or where would I be if I'd actually done that thing that deep down I knew I should have done. There's nothing that I regret, because I know that everything comes in good timing. But that has been a big lesson for me. I should have started this much sooner, should have. I don't love that word, but I feel that deep in my heart. I could have started this much sooner had I asked myself better questions, had I been using the platform that I use every day, using my plan to really ask myself better questions, and remembering that there is no such thing as failure. So go out, try something amazing today, try something different, knowing that you cannot suck, you cannot fail, and invariably good will always come from it. You're never going to regret what you did do. It's probably more what you didn't do. Okay, signing off. Hope you tune in for the next episode. I'll catch you soon. Bye.